So, let's talk about something huge, racial and ethnic division. It feels like it's everywhere, right? But what if the answer, or at least a powerful blueprint for one, has been hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years? That's the argument from scholar Bruce W. Fong. He looks at this ancient biblical text, Ephesians chapter 2, and says this speaks directly to what we're facing today. So we're going to break down his entire case piece by piece.
And to really set the stage, the article he's writing kicks off with this really powerful quote. The point is, this isn't just one problem on a long list of problems. The claim is that it's the foremost social problem facing the world today. I mean, that immediately raises the stakes, right? We're not just talking about being nicer to each other. We're talking about tackling what's being framed as the biggest social crisis on the planet.
Okay, and this is where we hit a really interesting paradox. The author is totally upfront about the fact that, yeah, the church has often been part of the problem historically. But, and this is a big but, he also argues that the solution, the unique solution, is actually hidden right inside the church's core theology. So, how can it be both the problem and the solution? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
All right, so here's our roadmap for this whole thing. First, we'll look at the big picture, this global, urgent problem. Then we'll dive into this idea of an ancient dividing wall. After that, we'll see how peace was supposedly made, what this one new humanity is all about, and then, finally, pull it all together into a modern blueprint for unity. Let's get into it.
So, first up, framing the problem. The argument here is that racial hostility isn't just some social issue happening out there. No, it's presented as a direct challenge to the church's very identity. From this viewpoint, bigotry isn't just a moral failing. It's seen as something fundamentally at odds with the core Christian message. It actually creates, you could say, a crisis of integrity.
Now, to really get a handle on the solution being proposed, we've got to travel back in time, about 2,000 years to be specific. The text uses what was, at the time, the prime example of division, the really deep-seated hostility between Jews and Gentiles. This ancient conflict is basically used as the case study, the model for understanding all these other kinds of divisions we see today.
So first, the text paints this really stark before picture. You have to imagine the ancient world. In it, the Gentiles were, for all intents and purposes, outsiders. They were spiritually cut off, socially separated from the promises and the hope that were central to the nation of Israel.
And when you lay it out like this, the contrast is just staggering. On one side, you've got this community with a sense of belonging, citizenship, and promises that gave them hope. And on the other side, total separation, exclusion, a future without that hope. The key takeaway here is that this wasn't just some small social gap. The author is describing it as a massive, unbridgeable spiritual chasm.
Okay, so if the chasm was that huge, how could you ever possibly bridge it? I mean, how could peace even be on the table? Well, the text doesn't just hint at a solution, it makes this bold claim that the wall separating them was totally, decisively torn down. So let's look at the theological engine, the how, behind that incredible claim.
So what was this dividing wall of hostility? The argument here is that it wasn't a literal physical wall. It was the Mosaic law itself. And it's super important to note, the point isn't that the law was bad. Not at all. It's that its specific rules, about food, customs, worship, created this really sharp, clear distinction between Jews and Gentiles. And over centuries, that distinction hardened into the very source of their mutual hostility. And this solution is laid out like a clear, three-step chain reaction. It's almost like theological dominoes. Step 1. Christ's death fulfilled the law's requirements. Step 2. Since the law was the source of the separation, fulfilling it took away the very reason for that separation. And therefore, step 3. The enmity itself was abolished. The cause was gone, so the effect, the enmity, disappeared with it. Simple as that. All right, so if you tear down a wall that separates two things, what happens next? What do you build in its place? The point being made is that this wasn't just about stopping a fight. It was about creating something completely new. And honestly, this idea is right at the absolute heart of the author's vision for what the church is supposed to be.
The math here is simple, but the idea is radical. It goes from 2 to 1. It's not about just getting two groups to kind of tolerate each other from a distance. Nope. It's about taking two groups that were opposed, getting rid of the very thing that divided them, and then forging them into one single, new, unified thing. It's a fundamental shift from us and them to a brand new collective we.
And this brings up a really crucial distinction. The goal was never assimilation.
It wasn't about Gentiles becoming Jews or Jews becoming Gentiles, not at all. Instead, it was about creating a kind of third way, a completely new identity. In this one new man, as the text calls it, your old ethnic or cultural labels don't just vanish, but they do become secondary to this new, more fundamental identity that everyone shares.
So, the big question is, how does this ancient argument about Jews and Gentiles from 2,000 years ago actually become a practical blueprint for tackling racial hostility today? This is where we connect the dots from theology to modern, real-world application.
Well, the consequences laid out here are pretty immediate, and they're definitely challenging. Think about it. If all believers are now fellow citizens in one single community, then any kind of segregation based on race or class or anything else becomes impossible to defend, theologically speaking. It means that reconciliation isn't just a nice idea or an optional extra. It becomes an essential, non-negotiable, visible proof of the core message itself.
And the text uses this final, powerful metaphor that really brings it all home. Picture a temple being built. Step 1, you have the foundation. That's the apostles and prophets. Step 2, you have the chief cornerstone. That's Christ, which is the crucial piece that aligns the entire structure and holds it all together. And then step 3, what about the rest of the building? The living stones? Well, that's all the believers, from every single background, all joined together, fitting perfectly into one structure, a single living dwelling place for God.
So, at the end of the day, the big takeaway is this. This unity isn't just some internal church policy. It's not just for them. The whole point is that in a world that is so fractured and divided by hostility, a community where people from all different backgrounds are actually unified in genuine harmony, well, that would be just about the most powerful testimony you could possibly imagine.
And so the article leaves us with this final, really challenging question to chew on. In a world that is still so deeply divided, what would the actual effect be if this ancient blueprint for radical, authentic unity was put on full display for everyone to see today? Now that is a powerful thought to end with.